Hi, I'm Frank, and this is How Does Make. We're kicking off the inaugural video on the channel by being part of the Rockler Plywood Challenge put on by the Modern Maker podcast. The idea, take one sheet of plywood, make something interesting. While a lot of people did big things, I managed to do a small batch of 32 of these very unique modern style wooden bud vases. It turned out pretty good. I apologize for the video quality, as I'm still trying to get everything started here. But I think it'll all turn out okay. That being said, let's get started with the project. So the first task I had on hand was to break down the full sheet of plywood into usable pieces for each individual vase. Judging by the test tubes that I had ordered off Amazon, I had figured out that each vase is going to take about 6 inches by 21 inches in material, so I decided to break down the sheets into that and then break them down farther from there. I also learned during this project that using my cell phone as my main form of camera is not the best option, and sometimes leads to some troubles. Whoops. After the plywood was broken up into the chunks that would make the individual vases, I then had to cut off 2-inch strips and then 2-inch plus the thickness of 2 pieces of plywood to make the original inside box before I started on the second layer. Next, I wanted to glue up the inside boxes before I started working on the outside boxes, mainly so I could work off their actual dimensions. So I just glued these small 2-inch pieces to the larger pieces and ended up with a box. After that, I can clamp them together with some rubber bands, mainly because I didn't have enough clamps to do all of them at one time. So I held them together with rubber bands and then let them dry. After the first boxes were glued up, they were still too tall and would be covering up the entire test tube, plus they had a giant hole in the bottom. So I set the fence on my table saw to the thickness of a sheet of plywood and just lopped off the bottom of each inside box. That way later I could go through and put the small pieces of plywood on the bottom, just glued in so we had a whole bottom to the box. After that, we were sizing up for the outside layers of the box. Pretty simple. Put the box on the fence, make that measurement, then add 2 thicknesses of plywood to make up the next layer. Also, don't put your camera on your table saw directly. Now that all the pieces were cut, it was just a matter of glue. You can see here how the pieces all fit together and how they ended up going together to make the original blank. So I just took all the pieces, added some glue, clamped them up with some more rubber bands, and then just set them off to the side to dry. Honestly, the process couldn't be easier, and the sizes aren't important. It's really a matter of what test tubes you have, or even if you wanted to use them. You can make this any size you want, just size it off the ones that you're actually using. Finally, after days of drawing, we got to my favorite part of the whole build, where I just set the table on the bandsaw to a random angle that would give me the most cutting area, and then just started hacking off corners and edges and anything that didn't look quite right. So I went from a giant box down to an organic shape that was really pleasing to look at. It didn't really matter what way you did it, it just cut it off until it looked good. The cool thing about having the tables on the bandsaw tilted is that just all the pieces just kind of fall into a pile, and you're left with all these really cool looking pieces that are really interesting to look at, but extremely sharp and a pain in the butt to clean up. Next came sanding. I cannot reiterate enough how much most build channels don't show you how much sanding you end up having to do. I always end up forgetting how long sanding takes. I'm telling you right now, every build you do, the amount of time it takes you to build it, add twice that for sanding. You'll be sanding for days. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to build it, you're going to sand for just as long of the amount of time. And this one was no exception. Every single facet on these vases has to be sanded down at least twice before you can get to finish. I started with an 80 grit and then moved to a 120 grit. And I just kept going until finally everything was at least somewhat presentable. For as much of a pain as sanding was, finishing couldn't have been easier. Normally I put on this Minwax polyacrylic with a brush or a rag or something, but being the size that these were and the fact that I had a gallon bucket that was empty enough that I could just dunk them in made it so much simpler. Just picked them up with a set of pliers, dunked them in, drained off the excess, and let them to the side to dry. I left it a little thick and a little bit more to clean up, but it was so much faster to get through them that it was actually quite easy and much better than it normally would be. Then it was back to sanding. Told you, sanding takes forever. Normally with Minwax, you just have to hit it with a hand sand to just kind of clean it up, but I was trying to go a little bit faster, so I started using this little palm sander I had. But the problem with the palm sander is that even with a 400 grit, it tended to melt the finish coat and left globs of melted plastic or something. It just ended up gunking up everything and making it a whole lot faster, so eventually I ended up switching over to just hand sanding. It took a little longer and a little bit more elbow grease, but it was a lot cleaner and made a much better result. And after hand sanding, the project was done. I ended up with a bunch of these bund vases. I hope this shows you what you can do with one sheet of plywood or even just that little scrap you have lying around from that other project you were doing. Doesn't take a whole lot of wood to make one of these, and they actually turned out really good. There you have it. One sheet of plywood, a couple days worth of work. You end up with a bunch of these vases that are perfect for a craft fair or holiday gifts or whatever you need them for. The thing it's great for them is that if you have that one little scrap sheet of plywood that's only 6 inches by 21 inches, hey, perfect size for just one of these, so you have a special gift for somebody else. Like I said, it's the first video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you want to see more. The quality can only go up from here. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you thought, what I can do better, and how to fix this whole thing about not knowing what I'm doing. Anyway, that's it for me. Have a good one. What other ideas do you think we can make for the contest, Jack? What do we have? What ideas do we have so far?
I don't know yet, but...
We said a house. We said bricks. We said a pogo stick. What else could we make?
A pole!
A paw?
No, a pole.
A pole?
Yeah, a pole.
Like what kind of pole?
Like a wood pole.
Like, and what would it look like?
It has to be painted black.
It has to be painted black. And how long is it?
It has to be like 10 feet tall.
10 feet tall?
No. 9 feet tall.
9 feet tall. Okay. And what are we going to do with the pole?
I know. Let's do it a satellite.
A satellite.
Yeah.
Okay. Like a satellite in space or a satellite like a dish?
A dish.
Okay. What do you think, Sophie? What should we make? You don't know? What do you want Daddy to make? What do you want me to make for you? You mean to make a bunny? A bunny. Bunnies are a good idea.
What should we make a bunny out of?
We'll make the bunny out of wood, right?
No. I don't like making bunnies out of wood.
No bunnies out of wood. Okay.
Yeah, because it's too strong.
We need something softer.
Yeah, we need something soft like cushion.
Okay.
And like pillows.
Like pillows.
And what else is soft? Daddy, what else is soft? And snuggly.
Marshmallows?
Marshmallows. That's food. We can't do that.
Oh.
We want to make sure that it's something that's so nice and cuddly, but it has to be not out of food. Only like blankets.
Blankets. We can make a soft, cuddly bunny out of blankets. You're right.
Daddy?
What?
What comes out of blankets?
What comes out of blankets?
Yeah.
Strings?
Oh, I know. Stuffing.
Oh, stuffing. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, let's make a bunny out of stuffing.
Okay, perfect. So, are we going to go back to the ideas of what we can make out of wood?
No.
No, we're done with that?
Yeah, I just like the bunny.
Okay.